to give you a preview of what I'll talk about in the next few minutes, I will share a bit of my background for those of you who don't know me. I'll walk you through some of my artistic inspirations. Then I'll share some of the stories behind a selection of the pieces that are in the show, and I will wrap things up with a quick reflection on what it feels like to be 5 years out from the completion of the mural project. So like I said, Muncie is not my hometown, but I grew up not too far away. I grew up in Bern, Indiana. My mom is a writer and a retired teacher. She's in the back right now. If anyone wants to say hi to her, give her a cheer.
She's not around over there.
Oh, she did? All right, she's somewhere here. My dad is back there. My dad is a painter and a retired carpenter. And yeah, give that a cheer too. Between the two of them, I grew up with a real interest in visual storytelling. And when I reflect on the first art that really captured my attention and made me want to make art myself, I always think about children's book illustrations. I have very vivid memories of seeing art by Mari Sendak, Faith Ringgold, and Edward Gorey. And I just fell in love with these illustrations of intricate interior scenes filled with all kinds of objects and details to get lost in. I also find a lot of joy in reproduction and artistic facsimiles of recognizable artifacts from popular culture, things like advertisements and product labels. Andy Warhol is a big source of inspiration for me in that regard. And I remember from elementary school classes all through my college art classes being aware of his role as a pop artist. But it was just a couple years ago when I got to see a lot of his early work all in one place at an exhibit at the Art Institute in Chicago. I felt really, really hard for his simple line drawings, his illustrations, and his commercial advertisements from before he became known as such a huge icon. Outside of illustrations and commercial artwork, I also draw a lot of inspiration from folk art, especially textiles and surface pattern designs. The last time I took a trip out of the country before COVID was to visit Mexico City on my honeymoon. And I just was struck by how vibrant and colorful every single corner of that city seemed to be, with patterns all over. It felt like the colorful worlds that I see in my imagination come to life. And it really stood out in contrast to a lot of the minimal, gray, new developments going up in my neighborhood in Philadelphia. So outside of doing artwork, by trade I'm a graphic designer, and I spend a lot of time producing work on a computer screen. It can be hard to get away from distractions of notifications and news alerts. So in recent years, painting has really become a tool for slowing down my mind and focusing on my mark making. That's part of the magic of watercolor, especially for me. It's a medium that requires a level of intentionality, really forces me to slow down, and helps me disconnect from those digital distractions. In the last few years, I've also started using painting as a form of diary keeping. I take so many photos on my phone that never see the light of day, never end up on Instagram, and I found that if I really want to capture the memory and feeling of a particular moment, a more meaningful way for me to do that is to bring out my sketchbook and then later turn it into a painting. So the paintings in this show, and I'll step over here, these ones are mine. They are a mix of imagination and memory. I'll share a little bit behind 3 of the most recent paintings in the show to give you a bit of story behind them. So Golden Slumber right here is an aerial view of the bedroom that I share with my husband in our tiny row home in Philadelphia. We've spent a lot more time than I think either of us ever anticipated that we might stuck within the walls of that house over the last couple years. But no matter how sick I am of being within the walls of our house in general, our bedroom still feels like a sacred, intimate space to me. There's this literal golden glow that comes in from the windows at certain times of day when the sun hits it, and that's what I wanted to capture in this painting. And I think this is also a good example of the way that my art is influenced by textiles and pattern designs. Dinner at Eric's over here is another overhead view, this time of a group of people sharing a meal of crabs. And this is pulled from what has become one of my favorite traditions over the past couple of years. Our friend Eric Sneed, who some of you might remember from when he taught at Ball State, lives in Maryland now, and A few times during the summer, we go down to spend the weekend on the beach and end our day with a big feast of crabs and sweet corn and lots of butter, lots of good conversation. So I just wanted to capture that memory in this piece. And the Old Bay label, I think, is also a good example of how I'm influenced by popular culture and advertising. Parade of Spirits over here differs from the other pieces I've pointed out in that it has full figures. The name comes from an annual winter solstice gathering that takes place in a neighborhood close to ours in Philadelphia. It's a festival that's based in Germanic lore, and all the attendees come wearing homemade costumes. So there's lots of paper masks, some paper mache, people dressed up to represent lost souls walking through the streets and being gathered. And it wraps up with this big bonfire at the end of the night in a public park. And especially after so much time in isolation, attending this festival this past winter was a really special moment that I wanted to capture. And these are actually the masks that my husband and me and our friend created to attend that event. You'll notice that hands are a recurring motif in my work. I drew all of the hands that are sprinkled across the wall on the mural, and so since those are kind of the most visual representation of my contributions to the mural, it felt fitting to have a lot of hands in the artwork that I shared in this show. Hands are something that I love to include in my artwork for a few different reasons. For starters, I just think they create unique, complex, interesting shapes, so they're fun to draw. But I also love hands for symbolic reasons. They are our sensory tools for experiencing the world around us, for touching the people that we love and creating memories. I also like the ambiguity that hands offer. You can't necessarily tell what someone's gender identity or age is just by looking at their hands. And so I hope that these scenes that are centered around hands offer the viewers the option to imagine themselves within that space and really feel what it might be like to be on a date at a restaurant or sharing a big meal with friends.